Okay, I'm very, very happy that Cecile Bibawy is with us this evening. And I think this will be a very important presentation for those of us who are hearing live, watching live, and those who watch later on. You know how concerned I am that we become a community in our diocese and around the world who are better able to support and serve those with mental illness, mental health issues. We understand more and more that this is not something that happens to a small group of other people, but it's something that happens to ourselves and to our families and people we love. Um, I have been one who used to read voraciously when I was a young boy and a man, and over the last 20 years, the internet rather took that away from me. But I have to say that I read all of Cecile's book in a 5-hour sitting. I sat down and read it all. I found it so interesting. And so I'm really looking forward myself to this presentation. Many of these presentations I organize not for your sake, but for my sake. And this is one of them. I want to hear what Cecile has to say. And so I hand over to you, Cecile, with great excitement and interest in everything you have to say. So please share with us what you have.
Thank you, Abuna. Thanks so much. I'm honored to be here. I just want to thank you for having me and for sharing me with your congregation, your people, and all the people that are on here. And just thank you for just this opportunity to not just tell my story, but just share my experience and how what happened in our family affected us and affected our community. So I grew up thinking people were watching me, and I thought it was normal. When I was 13, I was told that my best friend was connected to a committee of evil psychiatrists who watched our family around the clock. She was not to be trusted and posed a great danger. There were demons all around, including my uncle and my cousins on my mother's side. And there were still more to be discovered, including all my closest friends as they entered my life one by one. And one by one, they would be removed from my life. Truth to me was whatever my mother said, right? We always believe our parents, everything that they say when we're kids. And that truth that my mother was telling me was only for me. If they found out, we'd be in even more danger. The psychopathic criminals, aunts, uncles, cousins, best friends from school and church must never find out that my mother is onto them. I must stay away from them. And even if I don't think that they're necessarily that bad, I still have to protect my mother and our family. And even if I don't think that there's any danger or need for protection, I have to be a good daughter. I have to be a supportive daughter. If I don't cut off these people completely from my life, each friend or cousin or uncle or aunt, one by one, I hurt her, my mother. Every time I chat with a friend or a relative, I stab her in the heart with a knife. This is a window into what middle school and high school was like for me. The people who wanted to be close seemed to be the biggest threat to her. So they were not allowed to come to the house or see the family. If I wanted to hang out with them, it was in secret. And of course, I never told them that my mother was delusional and paranoid schizophrenic. So that's the summary of the story of what happened. There's a lot more, and it's all in the book. This is a picture. This is you can see the book here. But let me share with you how the mental illness affected me, or its effect on me. As you can imagine, or maybe you can't imagine, shame and bitterness became my unspoken identity. I wasn't even aware that I carried shame around like a noose around my neck. I had no capacity to make a connection between bitterness and shame. And maybe most of you know that bitterness is like a poison. It can harden our hearts. It can make us unable to see the love of God, to see the love that people have for us, and it also can prevent us from loving. I thought I had forgiven her. After all, she is sick. It's not her fault. And besides, she's my mom, right? So wasn't that enough? The confusion of belief was just something that existed in my life and in the life of my siblings. When I asked, why you, Mom? Can we move away? Are all my friends part of the plot against us? Will we ever be safe? Will we ever be normal? Regardless of the answer, regardless of what she told me, and I got some strange responses from her, of course, I believed her when I was all the way up my whole childhood up until high school. I believed everything she said. When I began to realize all I believed was really a delusion brought on by a chemical imbalance, I tried to convince her of the common reality. There are no psychopaths. There's no evil that's after you that's going to hurt us. We can have friends. We can be normal. She did not believe me. She rejected every single time. I kept Mom a secret because of the stigma, the shame. I was trying to protect her. I wanted to keep friends and live as normal of a life as possible. Besides, if I told people, they wouldn't believe me. Picture me at 21, just graduated from college and tasting an escape from my childhood, hospitalizations, treatment. Now I'm in college, fully independent, then marriage after that, and children. That chapter is closed, right? I will never have to deal with delusions, psychopaths, evil, friend control, mind control again. Sounds good, doesn't it? Do you believe me? Do you believe that that's what it was going to be like right after that? God was not finished with me. So if you believe nothing else, believe that. Believe that God was not finished with me yet. After years of prayer and counseling and learning how to hope, so treating hope like a verb instead of a noun, I began to heal. When I began to talk and write about what happened, the stigma and the shame began to evaporate. And I do mean beginning to. It was a long road. People are sincere. They are not out to get me. I was beginning to believe that. Now, how about the effect of the mental illness on our close, on our circle? So our friends, close friends and family members. My first cousins on my mother's side never knew that their aunt had schizophrenia growing up. The thing that made me feel the most alone was when I realized that they didn't know and that we grew up dealing with this all by ourselves. We were alone. When we told our uncle, my mother's brother, that my dad had given her psychotropic medicine for the last 15 years, and that's why she was calm, and that's why we were functional after many hospitalizations, and why our family was still together, he denied it. He didn't believe us. We were not to utter the word schizophrenia ever. Years of silence and being silenced and not being believed about what was really going on inside our home. They only believed what Mom told them, led me to assume that nobody would ever believe me. So I wanted to tell my cousins everything, every detail. They weren't ready or they weren't allowed. I want to tell you here in our meeting today. But before I do, I have two questions for you. The first one is, are you ready to listen, or do you want to listen to this? To hear the heart of my struggles, even if they're strange? And number two, if it's not me that's struggling with a mental condition, but my loved one, don't I have to respect her privacy or his privacy? I don't want to betray them. I want to keep their trust. So these are the issues that come about when I, as I used to build up the courage to start to talk about mental illness in my family. The life of secrecy and silence resulted in shame and loneliness. Fear of people finding out and getting away from you. It slows recovery. I can't see your faces now because you guys have your videos off, but if I could see your faces and have to look at you, which I have no problem. I mean, if you did, it would be great, but I guarantee you 20 years ago, if I, the thought of telling you that this was happening in my life, I would 100% be 100% sure that I would never see you again, or that you would avoid me like a plague. So, that was just to share my experience. That is what I really thought for much of my adult life. This is the result of stigma, not a result of having a mental health struggle or a mental illness. So, how do we remove stigma? So, I don't want to go on and on and on. I don't want to bore you. I have 4 ways that I found have been a great help for us in working towards cutting out the stigma of mental illness. I won't go into detail about all 4 of them, only one of them, but the 4 are understanding, education and resources, communication tools, and self-care. Buna and I were just talking about self-care with being creative and the gospel. But I'm going to focus while I'm talking, I'm going to focus on understanding. And then, of course, if you have any questions at the end, we can talk about some of the other ones that I mentioned, which are education and using your resources, communication tools, and self-care. Proverbs 3:13 says, happy is the man who finds wisdom and the man who gains understanding. And in Proverbs and Psalms, there's so many verses about understanding and gaining wisdom. Imagine what happens when the sick person is not believed. Imagine a person never being believed in a much worse way than when people didn't believe me, the caregiver. So I want you to, if I could see you, I would ask you, or you could even write it in the chat if you want to share. You don't have to. But if I asked you, how many of you are married or have a spouse or somebody close to you? Who doesn't have somebody close to them? I want you to picture in your mind this person, okay? Your spouse, your friend, your daughter, your son, your mom, or your dad, just somebody that's, in your very close circle, okay? And now I want you to imagine that I'm speaking to you, okay? While you're thinking about this person, okay? And we're going to get into the mind of a paranoid schizophrenic person, a person, just to be that specific, because that is what my mom has, but it can be just somebody who is not living in reality. So here it goes. Friend, I need to explain something to you. That man over there that you say is your husband, he's not really your husband. Yes, I know you've been saying it for years. You got married 20 years ago. You had children together. You live in the same house. But I'm sorry, it's not true. He's not really your husband. And since you think he is, you really need to take medicine to correct those wrong thoughts you have and be normal. So let's go. Where? To the hospital, of course. You need help. You're sick, don't you see? You need to get better. I only have your best in mind. I'm telling you this because I love you. Yes, I know. I've been telling you this for the last 20 years and you refuse to believe me. No matter how many times I tell you and the proof I show you and the prayers I pray for you, you won't listen. You're not married to him. He doesn't exist. Can you imagine me saying this to you about your loved one? That person in your life doesn't exist. The fact that you're so convinced that he is proof that you're sick. You have to trust me. Medicine will help you. I hate to see you like this. Please trust me. Okay, end of role playing, end of scenario. If these words are directed to you, what do you think your response would be? What if there was a whole army around you repeating these same words, not just me, or not just a loved one, but everybody around you? No one believes you when you insist that this person is really your spouse or your daughter or your parent. That is what my mother's experience was. That is exactly how she felt, because that is her reality. That's how real it is. It's as real as the chair I'm sitting on. It's as real as the screen you're looking at to her. It's her reality. So if we can think about the person going through something like that and try to understand that they're not in denial, but that there's a condition called anosognosia, and a majority of people with schizophrenia have this condition. Again, it's called anosognosia. It took me forever to figure out how to say that word. Then you can have an appreciation for what their life is like and for what they constantly, the state that they're constantly in. So that's the first point I wanted to make about understanding. The second point I wanted to make about understanding is that it's a disease of the brain. It's this idea that it can be compared to physical illness. So when we have a physical illness like cancer or diabetes, we take ourselves or our loved ones to the hospital or to the doctor for treatment right away. And there's never a question. When someone shares that they've been diagnosed with multiple sclerosis, no one says, you should just think positive if you want to feel better. Or, oh, stop exaggerating. Right? Nobody says that to a person with multiple sclerosis or cancer. But unfortunately, and sadly, people with mental illness hear these things said to them. Did you know that on an X-ray, the difference between a brain with and a brain without severe mental illness is visible? It's true. The bottom line, what I want you to take away from this is that mental illness is treatable. You know, for those of you that like numbers, 1 out of 5 in the US, I read that 30% in the UK suffer from at least one mental illness. In the US, 40% seek treatment. And of those who seek treatment, many of them wait a decade or more before they begin to get treatment. So, second point, mental illness is treatable. Third point I wanted to make, and the final point about understanding, is that though we have made gains, many people still believe that people with mental illness are dangerous and unpredictable. So it's the media that fuels these beliefs because they simply are not true. Many stories about crime, especially the most heinous crimes, usually reference the individual's history with mental illness. And while that's true, that many criminals do have mental illnesses, most people with mental illness don't commit crimes. In fact, people with mental illness are more likely to be the victims of the crimes than the perpetrators. TV shows and movies usually portray the mentally ill inaccurately. While some physicians are asking questions to screen patients for potential signs of mental issues, which is awesome, and school departments are becoming more aware of the signs of mental illness and colleges are beginning to offer services, we still have a long way to go. For example, the concept of mental strength might be foreign or offensive to people, even though we talk about the idea of physical strength all the time, no problem. But we don't like to talk about the idea of mental strength and that it's possible to achieve it. My mother, who has been sick with this illness for her whole adult life, is one of the strongest women I know mentally, emotionally. So those are my points on developing an understanding of about mental illness. Amid the confusion of what I believed and who believed me, there was always hope. After all, hope is a belief, right? I have hope, or I believe it will improve. For us believers in Christ, we always have hope, and therefore believe in the salvation of our souls, the end of all suffering in the last day. Even in our personal struggles with any trial, we have hope. We believe. In this week's Lent readings, in the Pauline epistle, we read that hope that is seen is not hope. Romans 8:24, right? We can't see it. That's the point. That's why it's called hope. Same with faith. Faith is the substance of things hoped for and the evidence of things not seen, right? But we nevertheless have that that we can be instilled with. We can be instilled with hope. 1 Peter 4 says, "Beloved, do not think it strange concerning the fiery trial, which is to try you as though some strange thing happened, but rejoice to the extent that you partake of Christ's sufferings, that when his glory is revealed, you may also be glad with exceeding joy." And in the Gospel of Mark, it says, "Do not be afraid, only believe." Jesus said that in the face of Jairus' daughter's death. He did raise her, but this verse is true for me, though he did not remove my mother's severe brain disease. God does not always remove our illnesses from us, but he does remove the stigma and its chains. And the result is much more than being normal. It's being free. So while I was writing the book, God gave me this acronym. It's STIR, stir. You know, like in Hebrews 10, where it says, let us consider one another in order to stir up love and good works, not forsaking the assembly of ourselves together, as in this manner of some, but exhorting one another so much the more as you see the day approaching. That's Hebrews 10, 24 and 25. We need to be intentional, humble, brave, and kind in everything, right? But when it comes to removing stigma, we need to stir up love and good works. We need to find ways to gather like we're doing right now. The lack of gathering during COVID has spurred a huge decline in mental health, as I'm sure all of you know. We need to go out of our way to get rid of stigma and tap into the freedom of stirring up love and good works, love and life for better mental health, physical health, spiritual health, just health. Talking freely about it will neutralize stigma and remove its transfixing poison. So the book is meant to empower people to instill hope for the mentally ill and their caregivers. So it's meant to provide solutions and not secrets, belonging, not banishing, and real love and not fear. Stigma petrified my mother and our family. It petrified me, perhaps as much as the brain disease itself. The engulfing social stain is like leprosy in Bible times. It prolonged treatment, discouraged the active pursuit of solutions for all of us, and diminished hope. My daughter Anna titled her high school senior thesis, "Stigma Keeps People Sick." It's true. Without stigma, we would have discovered much earlier ways to talk with her. There is a whole program put on created by Xavier Amador, who is a psychologist in the States, and he developed the LEAP program, LEAP, LEAP. It stands for listen, empathize, agree, and partner. And it's a whole communication tool. In it kind of trains caregivers on how to speak to somebody who is not living in the common reality. What did not work was spending endless hours trying to convince my mom that she was wrong or that she wasn't thinking properly. That never worked. And if anything, it chipped away at the trust that she had toward us. We wouldn't have fought alone and felt trapped. Stirring up love and good works raises the mind from the pit of shame, blame, rejection, isolation, and covers it with love, belonging, wellness, and hope. Thank you. That's all I have.
Thanks very much, Cecile. Thank you. And thank you for being so honest in your book and in speaking with us. I'm very interested. I have got the book that you mentioned that describes the LEAP process. I haven't got heavily into it yet. But would you describe in a little way how that works when you're dealing with someone in your family who is maybe not as profoundly ill as your own mother, but still living in an alternative reality, we can say, where it's hard to help them, or hard for them to see they need help. How does LEAP work in an ordinary way?
Yes. So that's a great question. So when I first read about it, I read it over and over again just to see if there was some magic trick, because he in his book, he talked about how much that really put his brother and put till now puts many of his patients on the path toward recovery through medicine and therapy, mainly medicine. So since I was so intrigued by it, I decided to try it. And of course, it didn't make my mother want to take medicine. My mother has never, ever wanted to take medicine, but at least got us to the point where we could have a conversation without her hanging up the phone on me. Yeah. So the first step is listen. And he describes the importance of listening as a two-way thing. It's an active listening. This is something we even hear about in Psychology 101, the whole idea of active listening. So the way that he says to do that is to say, let them speak and let them say what's on their mind and explain why they don't want to take the medicine, for example, or do whatever the thing is that would make their life a lot better, and then repeat it back to them. So let them speak, and then you say, okay, what I'm hearing is, and then repeat back that way you're validating them. You're validating they're speaking and that they have something to say and that you are listening to them. So that's the gist of the first step, which is listening. And it is, by the way, a sequence. So you do want to go in that order generally speaking. And then the E in LEAP stands for empathize. So this one, it sounds like an easy one. It's not always easy, but this one's good because it reminds us of the importance of empathizing with our loved one who is struggling. So sometimes we forget to do that when we're not the ones going through it, but it's super important. And so he put it in as part of the LEAP. And so empathizing is basically putting yourself in their shoes and affirming their feelings and affirming what they're going through is hard, it's difficult. And so that's empathizing. And then A is agreement. So this one can be very challenging for the caregiver because we don't want to agree with them. I never wanted to agree with my mother when she said that Uncle so-and-so is a dangerous man and therefore you can never speak to him again. I never wanted to agree with her when she told me to call the police when there was no real need to call the police, So this one he explains as it's not that you're agreeing with her or his statement that is out of the reality or out of what's real, but that you are agreeing with them with how difficult it is, or you're agreeing that, okay, if I were you, I would not want to take medicine for these reasons. Maybe they don't want to take their medicine because of the side effects. So it's easy to agree with that. So the key is to find something to agree with them, because that lends to the next and final step, which is partnership. That is what's going to make them feel like you are their partner in their health, in their journey, not their enemy.
Yeah.
So, and then the partnership is.
And how does that? Don't leave us hanging there. How does that look? How does that look in a situation where maybe someone isn't delusional, maybe someone is just very, very depressed, and they're overwhelmed with negative feelings, and we can't just say we want them to have true and positive thoughts, but we can't just say stop having negative feelings, have positive thoughts. I can see that. I can see the empathy. I can see the agreement. If I was you and I'd had your life, I would feel just as bad as you do. I can understand how hard it is for you. But the partnering, how should we find that way forward so that we end up with this process delivering something that's a step forward, a very small step perhaps, but a step forward? How does that work?
Well, sometimes it doesn't work.
No.
Sometimes it doesn't work, but I'm going to try to speak a little bit more broadly, so I'm not just talking about someone with paranoid delusions, but for sure when the goal is to make them feel like you're their partner. That way, whatever you say, if it's for their good, is going to be heard. That's what you want. So if somebody's depressed, for example, and I went through a major depression for 2 years. I do talk about that in the book too. And I was very blessed because I already was so into mental health. So I already knew that in order for me to pass through this, I would need to be very proactive. So my brother, for example, and my husband were my partners when I was going through this. But they never once told me, both of them never ever said something like, you need to just pick yourself up by your bootstraps, or your life is pretty good. I don't know what you're complaining about, right? I was told that by other people, because they don't understand, but they became my partners in the sense that they reminded me of what I needed reminders. They reminded me of things that I knew were already true. I just so easily forgot. Like, for example, you still need to get up in the morning and brush your teeth and go out of your house and take your walk or do your devotion, or, you don't want to go to the grocery store. That's too overwhelming. Okay, that's all right. I'm going to do that. I will do that for you. Now I feel like I have somebody who is down there in the dark with me. And so now I want to do whatever. I'm going to probably, I was much more inclined to do whatever he told me to do after that. That makes sense.
Are you, as you speak, I'm just thinking, and I'm thinking, are you suggesting almost that when we partner with someone, and I'm not talking about profound situations that are beyond most of our imagining, but when we partner with someone, we are giving them some strength, some space to focus on some of the small things they could do if they didn't feel so overwhelmed with everything, So don't worry, I'll go and get the groceries, and that gives them a little space maybe to take a short walk, But if they're just told, get on with the day, everything is too much. Is that how you're describing it?
Yes, exactly. Yes, that's exactly what I mean to say.
That's helpful for me. Someone has posted a message. Please, if you want to post questions, do so in the chat. Thanks for this remarkable and honest talk. How can understanding be empathic and supportive rather than just factual, cold, and even judgmental?
That's good. Communication is the first thing that comes to my mind. Is saying it. It's saying what your perception is of what they're going through. Just being honest and just saying, this is what I see that you're going through. Is this right? Am I right about that? Is trying to have trying to show them that you want to understand what's going on. Assuming nothing. You never want to assume anything, right? The more that we learn about mental health conditions, the more we understand, and it does get easier. But so it depends on where you are at on the spectrum of understanding about mental illness, but anybody can ask how you're doing. You know, when I give talks, I give talks to college students, and I pass out little pieces of paper that have like just little conversation starters. So like, and then we just kind of act it out and we role play. So like everybody gets a different one. And one is, for example, you don't look well today. Are you okay? Another one is, how are you doing? That's a very common one. Another one is, if you need to talk, I'm here. You know, it's these things that seem so logical, so commonsensical, but sometimes we don't do it. Sometimes, you know, we could be in our communities, wherever, and we just notice it from far away and we don't say anything. And it's such a huge difference when somebody just, you know, when I was going through my depression, just I would get texts from my friends, close friends, just saying, I'm thinking about you. I hope you're having a good day. Or, do you want to talk? I'm here for you and I'm free this evening. And that's it. And, you know, there was never any expectation, you know, nobody ever expected me to text back or to say thank you or anything. So I think it's just a matter of reaching out. We don't have to be best friends with somebody in order to say, I care, or I'm noticing, I notice you, I see you. Sometimes you don't notice. Sometimes sometimes you have no idea. The person isn't showing anything either, right? So and that brings up a much bigger problem, which is suffering alone and completely acting like everything is okay. And so people around you not knowing that everything is not okay. What then? And you know, when I had my experience with depression personally, I actually wrote an email. It was a very brief email, and I wrote it and I sent it it was like 5 or 6 people, saying, I just want you to know that I'm going through this. I don't expect anything. I just want you to know that this is happening. I'm very depressed, and please pray for me. And if you want to shoot me a text every once in a while, that would be great. And it was extremely, extremely freeing for me to do that. And it got me a little support. It wasn't a huge amount of support. It was just a little bit more than I would have gotten had I not said anything at all and tried to keep it a secret.
Yeah.
So.
From my perspective as a priest, I often have to go over the same things with people over and over and over again. And part of me wants to sort of shake the person, you know, but I'm learning not to, you know, absolutely not to, you know what I mean? But it's the same thing every day, even, you know. And as a priest, I'm able to tell these people who I care about very much, I am here. You cannot do anything that will offend me or make me give up on you at all. And I'm able to do that because I'm not living with this person, you know. But what was your experience, and what can you say about the burnout we get? I mean, I come from a family where we have issues as well, you know, and even if I didn't have issues, it's still a family, and there's a burnout in being part of a family. So it's easy for me as a priest to say, I'm here, I'm on your side every day. But how did you address that, and how can people address that when they're stuck in a family situation that is so exhausting, you know, and the same things are coming up over and over again?
I understand that so well. And the answers, there's more than one answer. We have to cover our situations in prayer. Number one, that's the first thing that helped me as a caregiver, is to place my mother at the foot of the cross and say, this is not in my hands. This is in your hands, Lord. I can't do anything. You won't heal her. Okay, then give us the strength and the wisdom to know what to do, to be the best caregivers we can be. And that takes a huge burden off. So prayer would be the first thing that I would say. And then the second thing is self-care. So myself included, caregivers will run themselves into the ground, taking care of their loved ones, thinking that that's what they have to do to be a good, and then you fill in the blank, right? A good Christian, a good daughter, a good parent, a good spouse, a good friend, whatever it is. And that's not true. That's not, that I would say that that's false. The more that we are equipped and cared for ourselves, the better caregivers we're going to be. If we're running ourselves into the ground, we're not going to be very good caregivers for the person that needs us. So I could talk, I mean, I could do a whole separate talk just on self-care, but not necessary here. But for sure, self-care is defined as the activity we do deliberately to take care of our mental, emotional, and spiritual and physical health to be able to fulfill our purpose better. So we want to address all of those. We want to address taking care of our mind, our body, and of course, our spirit, because they're all connected. And so when one is weak, all the rest are weak. So that's
just as you're saying that, I'm thinking that many who watch this now and who will watch it when I upload it, they probably feel guilty when they are thinking of themselves. They see a loved one who has a difficulty, a long-standing difficulty, and they probably feel, how can I go into the countryside for a morning? How can I go to the shops? How can I go to the gym? How can I do a Zumba class? So what do we need to say about that? What do we need to remember so that we prioritize our own self-care, and it's not selfishness?
Well, you're addressing the guilt. That's guilt. That's self-imposed guilt, and that's not of God, right? I mean, God does not want us. Guilt is not part of the vocabulary of Christians, right? God took care of that when he died on the cross. So we don't have to live with that, but we impose that on ourselves when we say, I can't go take a walk in the country, on the countryside. No, that I can't do that because they're sitting right there and they need me now, so yeah, we have to realize and understand that that's not of God. That's not what God would want us to do. Again, I so strongly believe this, that I want to be a good caregiver for my mother. So in order for me to do that, I have to set boundaries. And I mean, setting boundaries is kind of a part of this, right? Mom, I will be able to come see you at 2:00 after I do A, B, and C. Mom, I'll be able to do this thing with you, or I will be able to listen to you after I am gone for these just a few hours, or just 1 hour, if it's just even a half an hour walk or 20 minutes, just so that I can take care of myself, so that I can be better for you. My brain is dwindling, my body is tired. Let me take care of that, and then I can take care of you. And I know it's not in those words necessarily, but that's the only way I can think of addressing that. It's tough. Right? It's tough.
But that's fantastic. I'm often saying to people all the time that guilt is not part of our vocabulary. It's a temptation. It stands in the way of our service, our union with God, our service to others. If there is something that we should repent of, then we should do that and carry on moving on. But guilt is something very, very different. Michael has posted a message saying, "Thank you so much for sharing this. This is great information to help me understand my dad's case better. He is recovering from stroke, and we get into arguments because of trying to tell him that what he believes is not reality. He is frequently paranoid of the caregivers at his facility, and the LEAP method makes a lot of sense." Can you say again the name? I have it on my phone as a Kindle book to read. Can you say again the name of the author and his book? And I just want to say that here, when a stroke is concerned, it's very obviously a physiological change in the brain, isn't it? You know, it's not just buck up, you know, and have happy thoughts. It's something, So
Yeah.
can you describe a little bit more about the author who writes about the LEAP method? Maybe even a bit about his own background, just in a few sentences.
Yes, I actually just wrote the title and the author in the chat. It's called
Fantastic.
I Am Not Sick, I Don't Need Help by Xavier Amador. He's a clinical psychologist, and he came up with the LEAP program that we mentioned earlier. His background is that he is a clinical psychologist. I believe he has a PhD in this area. But his brother had paranoid schizophrenia and a severe case of anosognosia, which is the inability to see that you have an illness or that you're sick. And he ended up committing suicide, but when he was young, years and years ago. And he devotes the entire book to not just to telling the story about what happened with his brother, but also many stories of his patients and how they've been helped with the LEAP program, with the LEAP communication tool. Yeah.
Okay, if we have time for a few more questions, if you want to put them in the chat box. I had one experience. Normally, I'm not dealing with people with delusions, but I was invited to visit a patient in one of the mental hospitals in our area. He had wanted to speak to a Coptic priest. He was an Englishman, which surprised me. And when I got there, I thought we were having a talk about Coptic Orthodoxy, but he told me he was the Pharaoh of Egypt, and he was in touch with all of the gods of ancient Egypt, and I realized immediately this is a completely different conversation. But the reason I say that is he said to me at one point, "Do you believe me, Father?" And I said to this person, I said, "I believe 100% that you believe this is true." And he smiled and said, "Thank you so much for that," and I hope that was intuitively helpful to him. I couldn't agree he was the Pharaoh, but I could agree that this was his reality. You know what I mean? And perhaps you could say a little bit about the harm that we can cause, not just to a delusional person, but when we are not able to really empathize with someone, when we are trying to provide a treatment, but we are trying to impose it. What are some of the complications that introduces in our relationships, especially with loved ones, when we are just trying to impose a solution rather than to be empathetic and understand where they're at? It might seem that just making something happen in a medical way is what's required, but what problems does that introduce in a family or with close loving people?
Well, if the person is resistant to the treatment that you have in mind, or the plan of action that you believe is going to help this person, then they're not going to accept that imposition, and what that will do is destroy the trust that person has for you. And the goal, of course, is to be able to build the trust with this person, and which is one of the hardest things to do. But for sure, as much as we can, we want to build the trust. So imposing the plan of action pretty much never works. I mean, my mother has never believed a doctor, never trusted a doctor, so that's why it was so important that her kids tried to build trust with her, because we knew she wasn't going to believe anything that the doctor said in our situation. So we would still say, "Mom, this would really help you. Would you please just think about it? It's just like taking medicine for your thyroid, but it's just for your brain. That's all." And we would try to, most of the time that didn't work, to be honest. She still would reject it, because she would just keep saying over and over again, "I'm not mentally ill. Everyone else is wrong but me. I'm okay. You're all that are wrong, not me." But so it's not like you want to it's not like you need to walk on eggshells and not speak the truth. We do have to speak the truth, but if they're not going to, if they're not ready for it, or if they're not listening to it, or they can't hear it, then the only recourse we have is building their trust with love and empathy. Because yeah, like you were saying, what are the complications? I mean, the complications, I think the biggest one is that you lose their trust. Because once you lose their trust, then what happens, and what happened in my situation, is that they completely cut you out. They cut you out of their life completely. And then, it's like, oh, what if I would have said it this way? And the guilt comes in, and oh, and it's this vicious cycle. Yeah. So it's just better to just focus, depending on where you're at, and depending on how receptive they are to treatment. Of course, there's a whole spectrum on that too. My mother was on the extreme of no treatment ever. But yeah, it was just, then so for her, it was a matter of, okay, I'm just going to empathize with her feelings, and I'm going to just nod my head and take this is me being her caregiver and being the listening ear that she wants so badly. So
that leads me into a question about your if you will, if you're happy, what's your current relationship after a long period with your mother? What's your current relationship like, and how can we love her heart, when it is very complicated and very hard for us? Would you say a little bit about how you came to love your mother, how you came to appreciate your mother? And I got the sense reading the book that you appreciated that your mother cared about you. Your mother was protective of you. She was delusional, but within that delusion, she really cared about you, and wanted only good things for you. So in the long term, if we don't see the immediate healing or even a long-term improvement, how do we keep going, and how have you kept going?
Oh my goodness, so much to say here. So I lived with bitterness for a long time. And even though I thought I had forgiven her, I had, in my mind, I had forgiven her, just not in my heart.
Yeah.
And your question cuts right to the heart, because you're asking me, how did I finally love her? And, in the way, and in a way that just, I have no problem, going and spending as much time as she wants me to spend with her, or she allows me to spend with her. And this was a journey that started with therapy and started with therapy and took me through forgiveness of myself, and ended with being able to love her unconditionally, even though she couldn't love me unconditionally. So that was the secret, is that I lived with shame, and I bore shame, and I looked on myself as the worst individual, the worst daughter, and not worthy of that kind of love, the love that the way God loves us. So when I was finally able to forgive myself, then I was able to forgive. I was able to love her, and without any limitations, and without any conditions. So that was just kind of without, just kind of in a nutshell. That was my journey. The forgiveness was, I realized, was something that, it seems like it's easily done, right? Like I was saying before, she's my mother. I mean, and she's sick. It's not her fault. But the damage done to me was really, it was something that was so hard to live with. And when I went through therapy, I discovered what I missed out on. And that was really hard, was discovering what I missed out on, what I should have had. as a child. And, in a lot of ways, I had to grow up really fast, and I really didn't get a true childhood.
Yeah.
So I had to face all of these things, and that was super hard. But in the midst of that, what I didn't realize until I talked about it with somebody who's trained to bring these things out, is that I was blaming myself too. I was putting the blame on myself. So when I finally owned the fact and internalized the fact that it was something that happened to me, it wasn't my fault. And also, I talk about in the book, God sent me a friend of mine who was strangely familiar to me. And it turns out, she has very similar personality to my mother, and I just loved her so much. And so I got kind of a window to see what my mother would have been like without the mental illness, and that helped a lot too. So all of that to say, you have to pray and ask God to bring you to that point, to bring you to the point that he wants you to be at, which is to love. And that's why I called it Loving Her Mind, because it was so much more than just accepting her and accepting the fact that she is mentally ill and that she's probably never going to be free of this illness. But yet I could still love her exactly the way that she is with the illness.
Yes.
And that was because of God, because God is the one that took me, he had, dropped down this counselor. She's a Christian counselor. She helped me so much. And then this friend, and then all the support from my family and my husband and my children and close friends. So it was definitely a journey. It's not, there's not just one answer, so.
Well, one last question. I mean, I could ask you lots of questions, and I will arrange a podcast conversation with you later on in the year. But I'm interested in just a final question, and sorry that I do have so many that I could ask. It's to what extent your mother, or you felt your mother should have, to what extent your mother has some responsibility, not for her delusions, but for other aspects of her life, and to what extent does your unconditional love for her even take account of the fact that maybe she could be different? I don't know if she could be different. You know what I mean? Is she the best person that she could be with delusions, or is that part of her delusional psychology and mental illness as well? How have you overcome perhaps that a sense of anger, at your mother? That's my last question. I'm sorry, it's a serious one.
Let me make sure.
Do you feel, sorry, do you feel that did you feel even that your mother was partly responsible, not necessarily for her delusions, but for some of her other behaviors? And did that produce anger in you? And how have you worked through that? Or where are you with that?
I see. Okay. So I spent so many years trying to understand how she got sick.
Yeah.
And I wanted to know that more than anything else. How did this happen? Why did she get sick? People there's causes for all diseases. This, mental illness is no different. I can't answer that.
No.
Till now. I don't know. Till now.
No.
I still can't. I mean, we can theorize until kingdom come. We can theorize, but I don't know the answer. I have had people insinuate or imply that it must have been from past sins. And I think of the story of the man born blind that Jesus healed, said it was not because of his sins or his parents' sins. It was because I'm going to be glorified. So that, I believe that story is for me, then I thought maybe it was just genetics, but I've never been able to find out from my relatives if there was mental illness before my mother, because it was not discussed, and it's still not. encouraged to talk about this with them. So no answers there.
Yeah.
Is it, did she have a difficult childhood and maybe she was already prone? I know that with genes, you could be prone to it and then be triggered later. That's science says that it's a combination of both, but I think they're putting more on genetics now than environment.
Yeah.
The bottom line is I don't know.
No.
And
no.
so does that make it easier? No. Did it make me less angry? No, because why us, right?
Yeah.
In fact, I even used to say that I take cancer. Actually, I used to say, for years, I used to say I would take cancer over mental illness, over severe mental illness.
Yeah.
And then in the end of 2017, I got diagnosed with breast cancer, as you know from the book.
Yeah.
So when I received the diagnosis, I actually laughed because I felt like because I used to say that all the time, and I wasn't one bit afraid because I knew that it wouldn't be as hard as with my mother and caregiving for my mother and the 2 years of major depression I went through, and I was right. It wasn't as hard, and it was hard. Like I had to go through chemo, radiation, surgery, the whole 9 yards. But I'm telling you, and this is just more testimony about the stigma of mental illness. I got so much support when I was diagnosed with breast cancer than I did when I was going through depression. And I did not keep depression a secret. So I mean, they threw a Zumbathon for me. They raised money for me. They brought me meals. I was amazed, and I'm thankful. I'm so thankful for that. But it's just interesting because the support was not the same. So anyway, that's a side point, but but to answer your, I went off on a tangent. I'm sorry.
So you didn't spend and you don't spend time trying to the word that comes to mind is disarticulate. That's not what I mean, but divide your mother into several persons. She is just your mother, and today this is what we're dealing with. Is that fair?
Yeah. Yes, absolutely. I don't even try anymore to separate. No. Is this the sick mom talking or the health or the real mom talking?
Yes.
Yeah, I used to do that for a long time. Yeah, I don't do that anymore. No. Yeah. God this is how she is. And God is, if God is satisfied with her this way, then I need to be too.
Yes. Cecile, thank you so much. This has been as interesting as your book, and your book was well worth 5 hours of sitting down and reading. I have it with me on holiday. I will read it again. I'm so happy that you've been able to speak with us, and this will be a very, very helpful presentation for many people who can pick it up later on. All of these subjects are so important to our Orthodox community. I want the place where I serve to be a center of excellence around the issue of well-being, not just mental health, but well-being, and that's why I'm so interested in listening to Dr. Christine Agaby and many others, professionals from our own churches as well. But it's especially important to hear from you because you're not speaking hypothetically as a professional, you're speaking as someone who has gone through the abyss with this, and has come out the other side. Not an entirely broken person, but as you look in front of us, someone smiling, someone with hope and faith, and an experience of God working with you. Thank you so much. Let me sorry, say what you said.
Hey, thank you so much for having me, and it's been my honor just to be able to join you and to get to know you through this. I'm so happy to just get to know you, and I hope someday I can see you in person. And
fantastic. Fantastic. Let me turn off the recording.